Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of the most famous mysteries on Earth, the Bermuda Triangle. Just imagine waves rolling dark and restless under a sky, striped with lightning, and somewhere out there a ship leaves port, only to vanish as if it never existed. I bet you wouldn't survive more than 1 minute in the middle of that storm with your phone battery at 2%, and not a single Wi-Fi bar in sight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Take a deep breath. Maybe you've been carrying some worries today. Work, deadlines, arguments, or just the little gnawing anxieties that hang on even when you're trying to sleep. Set them down here. This story is your permission slip to relax. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The tale opens with the sea itself. The Bermuda Triangle sits in the Atlantic, and for centuries sailors have whispered that its waters are capricious. At first glance, it looks like any other broad stretch of ocean. But when storms build the surface, it turns into something more like a trapdoor. 1 second calm, the next snapping shut over an unsuspecting vessel. Early shipping logs are dotted with eerie notes, sudden squalls blowing in from nowhere, gusts so powerful they tore sails to shreds, and waves climbing higher than rooftops. One of the earliest mysteries tied to this region was not even framed as the Bermuda Triangle, yet no one called it that until the 20th century. But sailors in the 1600s already called the waters the Devil's Sea. Ships heading from Europe to the Americas sometimes never arrived. Their fates were rarely traced because records were poor and the ocean had a way of keeping secrets. But even then, captains were uneasy about a patch of ocean where storms grew like weeds. Here's the mainstream historical fact in the age of sail: hurricanes often caught fleets by surprise. Meteorology barely existed, so a hurricane could sweep in and scatter dozens of ships. That's one very rational reason why so many early vessels vanished. But even with hurricanes as an explanation, the sheer frequency of disappearances in this region started rumors of something more sinister. One quirky tidbit sailors told stories of waters that seemed to glow at night, as if the sea itself gave off light. Today, scientists explain that as bioluminescent plankton, tiny organisms that shimmer when stirred. But in the 1700s, it felt like proof that these seas belonged to something magical or dangerous, or both. And here's where scholars still debate. Is the Bermuda Triangle really any deadlier than other busy stretches of ocean? Or are we just better at noticing? Because of its reputation, scientists are still debating that, pointing out that heavy shipping lanes anywhere on Earth will see losses. Still, the Triangle's record is suspicious enough that the folklore persists. Picture it: the sky at dusk, sailors staring nervously at storm clouds bulging like bruises on the horizon. The captain orders sails furled, the sea roars, and then nothing. Silence. Days later, the vessel is marked overdue in port, but no wreckage floats back, no survivors crawl onto distant beaches. The ocean just swallows the evidence whole. And isn't that the spooky heart of this? You can fight a storm, you can brace against waves, but when the ocean gives you no trace, no plank of wood, no barrel bobbing in the tide, it feels personal, like something out there wanted you erased. Of course, storms themselves can seem cruelly intentional. The Gulf Stream, a powerful current that flows through the Triangle, is notorious for turning moderate winds into monstrous squalls. Ships that expected a routine voyage suddenly faced chaos. Imagine being below deck lanterns swinging wildly, the smell of wet wood, and panic in the air, and knowing the odds were slim. Sailors joked nervously about sea monsters. joked because it was easier than admitting they were afraid. And that's where our story begins, not with aliens or Atlantis just yet, but with the oldest, most primal foe of sailors, weather that moves faster than a man can pray. Already, by the time Europeans began regular crossings, the reputation of this ocean was darkening. Captains would sometimes choose longer routes rather than cut through what would eventually earn its sinister nickname. So tonight, as you settle deeper under your blanket, let your mind float with one of those wooden ships. Hear the timbers creak, feel the salt stinging your lips. A storm is building, sails snap, lightning paints the water white, and then the ship is gone. Another mark on the long ledger of vanishings. The ocean smooths over, pretending nothing ever happened. Christopher Columbus sails across the Atlantic in 1492, aiming for lands he has only imagined. His journal, careful, almost dutiful, suddenly slips into strange observations as he enters waters now marked by the Bermuda Triangle. Imagine it, the Santa Maria, rocking gently night, so black you can't tell where sky ends and ocean begins, and then a glow flickers on the horizon. Columbus records it plainly, a light like a candle rose and fell. He and his crew watch nervously, wondering if some other vessel or something unearthly lies ahead. This detail might sound small, but for centuries it has haunted historians. Was it a campfire on a distant shore, lightning playing tricks with the clouds? Or, as some fringe writers love to suggest, was Columbus the first European witness of the triangle's strangeness? The sailors, already jittery from weeks at sea, whispered among themselves, their fears bubbling like stew left unattended. The second oddity came with the compass. Columbus notes that the needle refused to point to true north. To us, that sounds like a broken instrument. But it wasn't. His compass worked fine. The problem is that the Earth itself plays tricks. In certain regions, the difference between magnetic north and true north grows wider. The Bermuda Triangle is one of only a few places on Earth where at certain times magnetic and true north align almost perfectly, causing needles to swing in unexpected ways. For sailors in the 15th century, that was a witchcraft at sea. Here's the historical fact. Columbus's logs confirm his compass issue on September 13th of 1492. It is one of the earliest written records of navigational oddities in that region. What's remarkable is that he chose not to tell the crew right away, fearing mutiny from men already half crazed by the endless ocean. Good call. Try telling exhausted sailors that their only reliable tool suddenly doesn't know which way is up. That's like your plane pilot today saying, "Oops, the GPS just disappeared, don't panic." Now the quirky tidbit, Columbus's men reportedly heard eerie noises beneath the waves. Later tales embroidered this into hammers pounding under the sea, or drums echoing in the deep. Scientists today would chalk it up to whale song or seismic rumbles on the seafloor. But for a superstitious sailor, every creak was a ghost, every splash a monster. And maybe after 2 months on salted meat, you'd believe it too. Scholars are still debating how much of Columbus's notes were objective truth and how much was colored by later translation. Was the light he described real, or was it embellished by chroniclers eager to tie discovery with mystery? Either way, the image is chilling men staring at a faint light, while trapped on an endless ocean, wondering if they were sailing towards salvation or doom. Let's pause and imagine that night more closely. The crew is restless. Their hammocks sway below deck, the smell of damp wood and sweat heavy in the air. Above, the lookout squints into the darkness and suddenly shouts. Everyone scrambles up. A flicker dances on the horizon, disappearing and reappearing like a candle in the wind. Columbus steadies his gaze, trying to look braver than he feels. The compass lies beside him, its needle twitching like a nervous hand. That moment sits at the very edge of human endurance, between rational explanation and whispered terror. To the sailors, it was proof they were sailing into a realm where the sea followed no rules. For us reading centuries later, it's a haunting entry in the long, mysterious diary of the Bermuda Triangle. And isn't it funny, you could argue the entire legend begins there with a candle-like light and a dancing compass needle. Small things that, when magnified by fear, become a legend large enough to swallow ships and planes whole. If you've ever woken at night because your phone screen lit up by itself, you know that uneasy mix of logic and imagination. Columbus's men had no phone, but their fear was the same. The ocean, meanwhile, kept rolling steady, indifferent. It didn't care that men were inventing stories above its surface. The triangle was just being itself stormy, magnetic, odd. But once Columbus wrote it down, the whispers gained ink, and ink never fades as quickly as seawater. By the mid-20th century, the Bermuda Triangle mystery took on a terrifying new chapter. December 5th, 1945. 5 Navy bombers, Flight 19, take off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on what should have been a routine training mission. The weather is decent, the planes are sturdy, Avengers, and the pilots are professionals. Nothing about the day suggests disaster. Yet within hours, every single aircraft is gone. Not damaged, not limping home. Gone like chalk wiped from a blackboard. The story plays out like a slow-motion nightmare. The lead pilot, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reports that his compass isn't working. He insists they're flying over the Florida Keys, but his men believe they're hundreds of miles off course. Confusion spreads through the squadron. Radio transmissions capture panic building. We can't be sure of any direction. Everything looks strange, even the ocean. Imagine hearing that on your headset. The one guy you're trusting with your life sounding unsure of the ground beneath the sky. Here's the historical fact. The official Navy report states that Flight 19 was lost after becoming disoriented over the Atlantic. The squadron flew until fuel ran out. The sea took them, and not a single trace was ever recovered. No bodies, no fuselages, not even floating life jackets. For 5 planes to vanish so completely is rare enough. For them to do so within the Triangle's infamous borders is the stuff of legend. A quirky tidbit local lore claims that people onshore saw strange lights in the sky that night, not unlike Columbus's candle centuries earlier. Some said the lights danced, others insisted they streaked downward like fireballs. Skeptics say it was meteors. December is prime meteor shower season. But of course, believers in the Triangle point to it as evidence of something else at play. Scientists are still debating whether human error alone explains the disaster. Lieutenant Taylor, it turned out, had gotten lost before. Was this just another case of a stressed pilot misreading the map, dragging 4 other planes into the sea with him? Or was something about the Triangle magnetic pull, distorted horizon lines, truly disorienting? To this day, no wreckage has been confirmed as Flight 19, even with modern sonar mapping much of the seabed. Imagine the scene from the cockpit. Dials glow dimly. Fuel needles sink lower. Ocean stretches endlessly below, reflecting the last orange light of dusk. A young pilot, maybe 20 years old, thinks about home, his mother, his sweetheart, the life waiting after the war. Instead, he hears his commander's voice crackling, uncertain, saying, "We can't find West. Everything looks wrong." One of the last messages received chills the blood. It looks like we are entering white water. We are completely lost. White water pilots today still puzzle over that phrase. Did he mean clouds foam, something else entirely? The words feel like a doorway cracked open onto mystery and then slammed shut forever. The Navy launched one of its largest search and rescue operations ever. Hundreds of planes and ships combed the area. They expected at least floating debris, an oil slick a wing. Nothing. Not a screw, not a shred of canvas. It was as if the Atlantic gulped the squadron down in a single swallow, then smoothed its lips. That silence left space for every theory under the sun. Some whispered about alien abduction, others about an undersea base. Rationalists shook their heads, storms, fatigue, navigation errors. But the absence of physical evidence kept fueling speculation. The Bermuda Triangle had claimed its poster child a story dramatic enough to anchor the legend for decades to come. And let's admit, 5 planes vanishing on the same mission feels like overkill. If the ocean wanted to make a statement, it succeeded. Even the calmest Navy report reads with an undertone of disbelief. One officer later confessed, "They just disappeared. We expected wreckage. We found none." So the legend grew, carried not just by sailors, but by newspapers and books whispered around campfires and classrooms. The Triangle wasn't just a stormy patch of ocean anymore. It was a place where entire squadrons could step off the map, never to return. Close your eyes tonight and picture it, a formation of 5 bombers' wings, gleaming in the sun, roaring out over blue water. Hours later, only silence remains. The sea keeps its secrets, and somewhere between rational error and impossible vanishings, the mystery deepens. If Flight 19 wasn't chilling enough, what happened next pushed the Bermuda Triangle from curious rumor into full-blown legend. The Navy determined to find its missing planes, and pilots dispatched a massive search effort within hours. Dozens of aircraft and ships swept out into the Atlantic, combing every likely corridor. Among them was a Martin PBM Mariner flying boat, one of the largest search and rescue planes of its time. Its job was to scan the sea for life rafts, oil slicks, or wreckage. It never came back. That's right. Within the same cursed night, the rescue plane assigned to find the vanished bombers vanished itself. It lifted off from Banana River Naval Air Station with a crew of 13 radioed once after takeoff, and then nothing. Silence. Searchers later noted that mariners had earned the unfortunate nickname flying gas tanks. Leaks were common, and one theory is that the Mariner exploded mid-air due to fuel vapors. A tanker reported seeing a fireball in the sky about where the plane should have been, which seems plausible. Still, no wreckage was found, no crew recovered. 13 more men swallowed by the sea. Here's the historical fact: the Navy's official report for the PBM Mariner does indeed suggest a mid-air explosion, citing that crew's last known position. But even with that explanation, the coincidence is outrageous. In the span of a few hours, 6 military aircraft and 30 lives disappeared without a single piece of verifiable evidence left behind. The quirky tidbit newspapers the next day leaned hard into the supernatural. Headlines whispered about a deadly curse, and one Florida paper joked that the Atlantic had developed a taste for airplanes. You can almost hear the groan from Navy brass trying to keep discipline, while the public imagination ran wild. And here's the ongoing scholarly debate. Even if the Mariner did explode, why wasn't any debris found? Normally, an aircraft breaking apart in the air scatters pieces across miles of ocean. Search ships in the area were equipped to spot even minor wreckage. The fact that nothing washed ashore, nothing bobbed to the surface, keeps conspiracy embers glowing. Scientists are still debating that silence of evidence. It's one of those uncomfortable holes in history that feels wider than it should. Picture that night, storm clouds pushing in waves lifting white against black sky. Out there somewhere, 5 bombers fly until fuel runs dry. Somewhere else, a rescue craft circles engines, humming crew, leaning out windows into the dark. A flash, a roar. Then the Atlantic settles calm as a pond, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. Imagine being back at the airbase waiting. A young wife cradles the phone, heart racing every time it rings. Families gather near radios desperate for updates. Instead, the announcement. The search plane is missing too. The dread is like dominoes, falling one loss, triggering another, the chain unstoppable, and the sailors out searching. They must have glanced nervously at the horizon, whispering to each other. If the bomber's vanished, and the mariner too, are we next? It's the sort of creeping fear that settles in your stomach and refuses to leave. So the Bermuda Triangle grew another legend, layered on top of Flight 19. Not just that planes could vanish, but that those who came looking might vanish as well. A mystery within a mystery, an echo inside an echo. The ocean seemed to laugh quietly at man's persistence. Come closer, it seemed to say. Search harder. I'll only take more. And isn't that the stuff of nightmares? The idea that help itself can be swallowed, that rescue only adds names to the missing list. It's like throwing a lifeline into a black hole. You don't just lose the victim. You lose the rope too. The Navy closed its investigation, citing errors, whether possible explosions. But outside official papers, the public kept a different verdict. The Bermuda Triangle was no longer just sailor gossip or Columbus's strange lights. It was now a place where modern machines and trained men could vanish twice over in a single night. And when people whispered about curses or alien abductions, no one laughed too hard. After all, the sea hadn't left behind a single shred of proof to argue otherwise. By now, the Bermuda Triangle had a reputation that could make even seasoned pilots sweat through their uniforms. And one of the recurring details from countless stories, whether ship's logs, pilot reports, or fishermen's tales, is that compasses, the simplest and most essential of navigation tools, tend to go haywire there. Think about it. You're flying a plane over endless blue, or steering a ship where the horizon looks the same in every direction. Your only lifeline is that tiny needle pointing north. And then, without warning, it jitters, spins, or points stubbornly, where north clearly is not. If you've ever had your GPS reroute you in circles on a road trip, you know how frustrating that feels. Now imagine that frustration in the middle of the ocean, with no gas station, no exit ramp, no recalculating, just water and rising panic. The historical fact is fascinating. The Bermuda Triangle sits near one of the world's few true north alignment zones. Normally, navigators account for the difference between magnetic north, where your compass points, and true north, the actual pole. But in certain places, including parts of the triangle, those two alignments overlap in confusing ways. Early pilots and sailors didn't always know how to correct for it, and the result was disaster. Even modern navigators sometimes report odd compass drifts. Here's a quirky tidbit stories tell of compasses spinning in circles or freezing as if welded in place. Some 19th century sailors even carried two compasses, convinced that one was possessed while the other stayed loyal. A few journals record desperate prayers to St. Brendan, the patron saint of sailors, to bind the needle back to north. Of course, today's scientists suggest magnetic anomalies, not divine intervention, but it's still fun to imagine sailors trying to exercise a compass like it was a haunted doll. And scientists are still debating whether the anomalies in the triangle are stronger or stranger than those found elsewhere on Earth. After all, other regions, like parts of the Arctic, also mess with magnetic fields. But there's something unsettling about this particular patch of ocean where misread needles coincide so often with missing ships. It's as though the triangle hands out faulty maps on purpose, then waits patiently for its prey to wander off course. Picture yourself in a cockpit in the 1950s, cruising at a few thousand feet, Clouds press low, the sea below is endless slate. You check your compass, it points east. 10 minutes later, the horizon hasn't changed, but now it points south. Your co-pilot frowns, taps the dial, but it refuses to settle. The radio crackles, voices half garbled, and suddenly the Atlantic feels like a maze with invisible walls. Or imagine being a sailor in 1872, squinting by lantern light, as your compass needle drifts away from north, then swings lazily back as if mocking you. The men mutter in languages from every corner of the world, united by the same dread the ocean is playing tricks. And when the wind shifts unexpectedly, the compass becomes more an enemy than a friend. It's almost comical humans invent a tool to master nature, and nature smirks and fiddles with the magnetism. Like unplugging a gamer's controller right in the middle of a boss fight. 3 centuries later, we're still shaking our fists at a tiny floating needle begging it to behave. But humor, aside the compass, stories form one of the strongest threads tying together the Bermuda Triangle myth. Storms come and go. Hurricanes explain some losses, but when navigators lose their only sense of direction, disaster feels inevitable. Without guidance, ships drift into reefs, planes veer into empty sea, and when no wreckage is found, the silence of the compass becomes part of the silence of the ocean. So the legend deepens. Not only do ships and planes vanish here, but even the most basic laws of navigation falter. North itself seems uncertain, as though the triangle has decided directions are optional, and that more than monsters or aliens might be the most terrifying trick of all. By the time the 1960s rolled around, the Bermuda Triangle had already stacked up its chilling reputation. But here's the detail that keeps so many people hooked for all the stories of wrecks, bodies and ships swallowed whole. What's most unnerving is how little evidence ever shows up. Wrecks that should exist simply don't. Think about how vast the ocean is, but also how persistent it can be in coughing up its secrets. After Titanic went down in 1912, debris floated for weeks, washing ashore as far as Canada. When a modern plane crashes, investigators usually recover floating fragments within hours. Yet, in the Bermuda Triangle, dozens of ships and aircraft vanish with no oil slicks, no flotsam, no drifting life preservers. It's like throwing a vase against a wall and watching it vanish into thin air instead of shattering. Here's the historical fact. The US Coast Guard and Navy have both documented official searches in the region that turned up absolutely nothing. For example, in 1918, the USS Cyclops, a massive naval collier carrying more than 300 men and 10,000 tons of manganese ore, vanished without a distress call. Despite being one of the largest ships in the Navy, and despite an intensive search, not a single bolt or plank was found. To this day, it remains the largest non-combat loss of life in US Navy history. And a quirky tidbit, divers and treasure hunters who scour the seafloor around Bermuda sometimes tell stories of phantom wrecks. They spot shapes on sonar metallic shadows that seem like a ship's outline, but when they dive down, nothing is there. Equipment glitches, wishful thinking, or as some suggest with a grin, the triangle playing peekaboo. Scientists are still debating whether the lack of wreckage is truly abnormal or just perception bias. After all, the ocean is deep, over 12,000 feet in places, and currents are powerful enough to scatter debris over hundreds of miles. Still, skeptics admit it's odd how consistently some disappearances leave not even a single trace. It's the silence that unnerves more than the sinking itself. Picture the USS Cyclops steaming across the Atlantic, engines, thundering crew going about daily routines. The galley smells of coffee boots clatter on deck. Men laugh at bad jokes. Then mid-voyage radio silence. Hours stretch into days. Families back home wait by telegram wires, but nothing comes. Somewhere in that endless blue, an entire ship has vanished, and the ocean wears its calm face as if nothing ever happened. That eerie absence is what feeds the legend. If a wreck is found, people can mourn, study, explain. But when the sea offers nothing, imagination fills the vacuum. Some picture giant whirlpools sucking ships down. Others imagine interdimensional doorways opening and closing like elevator doors. And the more sober-minded simply shake their heads at the cruel thoroughness of the Atlantic. Even modern technology struggles. In recent decades, sonar sweeps and underwater drones have scanned wide patches of the triangle, mapping trenches and ridges like scars on the seafloor. They've uncovered plenty of wrecks, mostly fishing vessels and freighters. But the famous disappearances, the ones that should leave behind obvious remains, are nowhere to be seen. It's like the ocean is curating its own museum, hiding the exhibits it doesn't want visitors to view. Imagine standing on a sunny beach in Miami, tourists laughing, umbrellas dotting the sand. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, a freighter fails to arrive. The port cranes wait idle, the crew's families grow anxious, and in official paperwork, the words appear again and again, lost without trace. Those 3 words weigh heavier than 1,000 tons of steel. And so, the Bermuda Triangle's mystery deepens, not just because ships sink everywhere, but because here the ocean seems to erase its mistakes. No floating barrels, no broken beams, just silence, like a magician sweeping his cloak and making the evidence disappear. By the 1970s, the Bermuda Triangle wasn't just a cluster of strange maritime accidents, it had become pop culture. People were no longer whispering about it. They were shouting it from bookstore shelves and TV screens. If you wanted to spook your friends at a dinner party or sell a paperback with a glowing title, the Triangle was your golden ticket. Here's the fact: the term Bermuda Triangle was first popularized in 1964 by Vincent Gaddis in a magazine article, later expanded into his book, Invisible Horizons: True Mysteries of the Sea. Gaddis collected various disappearances, Flight 19, the Cyclops, a handful of yachts, and wove them into one geographical curse zone. Before that, sailors had spoken of oddities in the region, but it was Gaddis who drew a triangle on the map and handed the world a brand new mystery. Then came Charles Berlitz. In 1974, his book, The Bermuda Triangle, exploded onto the scene, selling millions of copies worldwide. Berlitz leaned hard into the supernatural, alien abductions, lost technology from Atlantis, even time warps. He didn't just tell stories. He gave readers a cosmic theater of possibilities. The book was ridiculed by scientists, but it didn't matter, people were hooked. It was translated into dozens of languages and spawned an entire industry of spin-offs, documentaries, and late-night radio debates. Quirky tidbit: Berlitz, a language teacher and heir to the Berlitz language empire, admitted he had no seafaring experience. He built his triangle theories in libraries, not on ships. Yet somehow his outsider's imagination gave the legend global legs. Hollywood followed. TV specials in the 70s showed dramatic recreations of ships vanishing under stormy skies, complete with eerie music, and actors glancing nervously at empty radar screens. In 1977, Leonard Nimoy's show In Search Of aired an episode on the Bermuda Triangle, narrated with Spock-like gravitas. By then, the mystery had entered the mainstream consciousness, forever entwined with UFOs, pyramids, and Bigfoot. And here's a fun cultural ripple: travel agents in Miami noticed that the mystery boosted tourism. Instead of scaring people away, the Bermuda Triangle drew curious visitors. Hotels in Bermuda, Nassau, and San Juan leaned into it with themed cocktails and brochures. Who wouldn't want to sip a rum punch while joking about getting lost in the triangle? But let's not forget the counterpunch. Around the same time, skeptics and debunkers emerged. Marine insurance companies who actually tracked shipping losses released reports showing that disappearances in the triangle weren't statistically higher than in other busy oceans. Oceanographers pointed out that hurricanes' rough currents and shallow reefs explained most wrecks. In 1975, journalist Larry Kusher published The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, meticulously fact-checking the sensational stories. He found many were exaggerated or misreported. Flight 19, for instance, wasn't 5 planes vanishing simultaneously. It was 5 planes lost in confusion, plus a rescue plane that also went down due to mechanical failure. Yet, the legend didn't die. If anything, the tug-of-war between believers and skeptics made it juicier. Every time Kusher rolled his eyes, Berlitz widened his, and the public caught between dry data and thrilling mystery often chose the version that made their hearts race. Imagine walking into a dim-lit bookstore in 1974, the smell of paper and ink thick in the air. On a stand near the front, Berlitz's book sits with a glowing blue triangle on the cover. You pick it up, flip through tales of ghost ships and underwater pyramids, and suddenly the ordinary ocean feels charged with secrets. That's the magic the triangle had in the 70s. It turned geography into mythology. By the end of the decade, the Bermuda Triangle had gone from a regional curiosity to one of the most famous mysteries on Earth. And like any good story, it had found its rhythm tales of vanishing ships, colorful theories, skeptical rebuttals, and millions of people leaning closer to hear the next chapter. As the Bermuda Triangle legend thrived through the 1980s and 1990s, one question kept surfacing: if it wasn't aliens or Atlantis, then what could possibly cause so many disappearances? Scientists and enthusiasts alike rolled up their sleeves, offering natural explanations that were just as fascinating as the myths. One of the most popular theories involves methane hydrates, frozen gas trapped beneath the seabed. Here's the science. When disturbed, methane hydrates can suddenly erupt, releasing giant bubbles of gas. In a laboratory tank, this phenomenon has been shown to dramatically reduce water's density. A ship floating above could lose buoyancy instantly and sink like a stone, leaving little trace. In the air, a burst of methane could stall aircraft engines. No aliens required, just chemistry. Another explanation: rogue waves. These are freakishly large walls of water, sometimes 80-100 feet tall, formed by converging currents in storms. Satellite data confirmed their existence in the 1990s, proving that mariners' old tales of monster waves weren't exaggerations. In the busy shipping lanes of the Triangle, rogue waves could easily swallow a freighter or small plane before anyone could call for help. Then there's the compass mystery. For centuries, sailors reported that compasses behaved oddly in the region. Early theories suggested that one of the few places where true north and magnetic north align falls within the triangle, causing navigational confusion. While this isn't as dramatic as a magnetic vortex, it could explain why inexperienced pilots and captains sometimes steered fatally off course. Add in the Gulf Stream, one of the strongest ocean currents in the world, and you get a recipe for rapid disappearance. Any wreckage, life rafts, cargo, fuel, slicks could be whisked away within hours, scattered across thousands of miles. To a search party, it would look as if the ship had never existed. A quirky tidbit: in 2016, a team of Norwegian scientists studying craters on the seafloor in the Barents Sea suggested methane eruptions as a triangle-like mechanism. Headlines ran wild: scientists solve Bermuda Triangle mystery. But within days, other experts pointed out the flaw. The methane blowouts they studied were in shallow Arctic waters, not the deep Atlantic trenches of the Triangle. Still, the story went viral, proving the public's hunger for explanations hadn't faded. Even weather offers eerie possibilities. The Triangle sits in Hurricane Alley, where storms form quickly and ferociously. Squalls can rise in minutes, cloaking the horizon in rain so dense it blinds pilots and sailors alike. Add waterspouts tornadoes that touch down on the sea, and you get scenes straight out of a nightmare swirling funnels that could rip small vessels apart. And yet, despite all these explanations, the puzzle remains sticky. None can account for every incident. Methane eruptions don't happen everywhere. Rogue waves, while real, are rare. Compasses may mislead, but not enough to erase entire aircraft carriers. The Triangle seems to shrug at each new theory, whispering, "Try again." Picture this. You're on a cargo ship in the 1980s, heading from Puerto Rico to Florida. The radar hums, the compass points steady. The sea looks calm. Suddenly, the horizon darkens, the wind shifts, and a wall of water rises out of nowhere, higher than any building in your hometown. There's no time to turn, no time to radio. One moment you exist, the next the ocean closes over you. That's the Bermuda Triangle's trick. It doesn't need extraterrestrials to terrify. Nature itself, in its raw power, is stranger and deadlier than most fiction. And while skeptics insist that's all it is, storms, waves, currents, the silence after each disappearance leaves room for imagination to sneak in. By the 1990s, the Triangle wasn't just a geographical curiosity anymore. It had become a canvas where science and myth painted side by side, each stroke deepening the mystery. The legend of the Bermuda Triangle is easy to picture as a vague swath of ocean, but its actual geography is surprisingly neat. The classic version forms a triangle with three sharp points: Miami, Florida, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the island of Bermuda. Within this triangle lies a zone of some 500,000 square miles, vast enough to hold entire countries, yet narrow enough that its boundaries can be drawn with a pencil on a map. Sail out of Miami, and you'd quickly find yourself skirting the western edge. Head east toward Bermuda, and you're cutting across deep Atlantic trenches, places where the seafloor plunges 5 miles down. That abyss swallows wreckage the way a black hole devours light. To the south, Puerto Rico anchors the triangle's third corner, brushing the edge of the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean. If something sinks, they don't expect it back. The climate adds to the danger. Warm currents surge north from the Caribbean, colliding with cooler waters from the North Atlantic. The result, sudden storms, unpredictable squalls and waterspouts that can pop up without warning. Pilots describe clear skies giving way to violent cloud banks in minutes, while sailors know that the Gulf Stream can turn a calm deck into chaos in the blink of an eye. Historically, this geography shaped trade and conquest. Spanish treasure fleets passed through the Triangle, on their way back to Europe, hauling gold and silver from the New World. Many never made it. Hurricanes ripped galleons apart, scattering coins across the seabed like confetti. Centuries later, steamships and passenger liners followed similar routes drawn by the directness of the path, and some of them too vanished into the silence. A quirky little fact, Bermuda itself earned the nickname Isle of Devils from early sailors long before the Triangle legend took root. The island was ringed by dangerous reefs that shredded wooden hulls. At night, the cries of seabirds sounded eerie to superstitious ears, convincing many that spirits haunted the shore. Even Shakespeare may have borrowed from these tales when writing The Tempest. Today, millions of tourists fly and sail across the Triangle every year. Cruise ships parade between Florida and the Caribbean, and commercial flights crisscross its skies by the hour. the vast majority complete their journeys without so much as a wobble of turbulence. Still, the geography doesn't change: fierce currents, deep trenches, volatile weather. Scientists are still debating whether these natural conditions are enough to explain centuries of disappearance stories, or whether cultural imagination piled layers of myth onto a relatively normal stretch of sea. Picture yourself floating there halfway between Miami and Bermuda. The water is so deep it feels endless, a dark sapphire stretching down into forever. The sky glows pink with sunset, and the air smells of salt and ozone. In that moment, the triangle feels both ordinary and enchanted, a place where geography alone could inspire fear and wonder. And that perhaps is the secret of its power. Not everything that vanishes here needs aliens or curses. Sometimes the land and sea themselves provide more than enough mystery. By the late 20th century, scientists began sharpening their pens and their sarcasm against the Bermuda Triangle's reputation. For every dramatic tale of vanishing planes and ghost ships, researchers pointed out something simple. The Triangle is one of the busiest shipping lanes and flight paths in the world. With thousands of vessels crossing it each week, the occasional accident, while tragic, wasn't statistically unusual. In 1975, author Larry Kuscher published The Bermuda Triangle Mystery, solved a book that annoyed mystery lovers but delighted skeptics. Kuscher dug into newspapers' weather reports and Coast Guard files, only to discover that many mysteries had very ordinary explanations. Ships supposedly vanishing without a trace. Several were later found logged or had sunk in hurricanes that writers conveniently forgot to mention. Aircraft gone missing. Sometimes they had been recovered, or hadn't been in the triangle at all. Kuscher's conclusion was blunt: the mystery wasn't in the sea, but in sloppy research. Another respected skeptic, David Kuscher's Coast Guard contemporaries, echoed this. Their official stance was clear. The Coast Guard does not recognize the existence of the so-called Bermuda Triangle as an area of specific hazard. Ouch. To them, the danger came from storms, human error, and navigational challenges, things mariners had battled long before a catchy label turned this patch of water into a tourist-friendly enigma. But not all scientists brushed it off so quickly. Meteorologists pointed out how fast-moving storms in the region could create situations deadlier than in calmer waters. Oceanographers studied the Gulf Stream's swift current, capable of scattering wreckage far from the accident site in hours. Aviation experts reminded the public that early planes like those in Flight 19 were poorly equipped for sudden weather shifts. In short, even if the triangle wasn't cursed, it was unforgiving. A quirky tidbit: in 1988, Lloyd's of London, famous for insuring everything from celebrities' voices to racehorses, was asked whether insurance rates were higher for ships crossing the triangle. Their answer: nope. Ships weren't more likely to vanish there than anywhere else. That didn't make for a thrilling headline, but it certainly poked a hole in the drama. Still, public fascination outpaced the skeptics. Each debunking seemed to fuel fresh theories. Scientists could argue human error until they were blue in the face, but the average listener heard, so people just keep getting lost in the same spot for centuries by accident. That sounded just as suspicious as aliens. The debate became almost theatrical. On one side, scientists waving charts, statistics, and rational explanations. On the other, storytellers weaving tales of compasses, spinning time warps, and ghostly lights. Neither side ever truly won, because the triangle didn't stop swallowing headlines, even if it wasn't swallowing more ships than usual. Picture a scientist at a 1990s press conference sighing as they repeat, "There is no Bermuda Triangle mystery." Now picture a TV producer across town smiling while editing dramatic footage of storm clouds and quoting, But what if there is guess which clip made it onto evening television? Exactly. Science fought back, but the triangle, with its mix of geography, history, and human imagination, proved remarkably resistant to reason. If storms and human error weren't dramatic enough, another natural theory bubbled up from the ocean floor literally. Scientists speculated that methane gas hydrates buried beneath the seabed could play a role in the triangle's deadlier mysteries. Here's how it works. Methane gas under immense pressure freezes into ice-like crystals deep within the ocean floor. These hydrates are stable until they're not. A landslide, earthquake, or shift in temperature could suddenly release vast plumes of methane into the sea. The gas racing upward creates frothy water with drastically reduced density. A ship floating above might find its buoyancy vanish, sinking within seconds. For aircraft flying overhead, methane clouds could stall engines or even cause explosions if concentrations were high enough. The theory gained traction in the late 20th century because it explained both vanishing ships and planes crashing without distress calls. Plus, it had that irresistible quality. It was rooted in real science, but still spooky. Imagine sailing on a calm, glassy ocean, then without warning, the water beneath you turns to fizz, and your ship plummets like a dropped coin. No storm, no wave, no warning. A quirky tidbit: in 1981, Australian researchers tested this in miniature. They filled a tank with water-injected methane bubbles and placed a model ship on top. The moment the bubbles reached the surface, the model sank in seconds. It was oddly anticlimactic. No alien tractor beams, no Atlantis, just physics, but eerie nonetheless. Critics, of course, pounced. Methane hydrates are more common in shallow Arctic waters, not in the deep trenches of the Bermuda Triangle. The likelihood of a massive eruption happening precisely when a ship or plane passed overhead was slim. Scientists are still debating whether methane releases occur in the Atlantic at scales large enough to be dangerous. But the imagery stuck. Tabloids love to splash headlines like ships sucked down by giant gas bubbles, and readers love to imagine the ocean suddenly betraying them. It was simple, terrifying, and most importantly, possible. Picture yourself as a sailor in the 1970s, hearing this theory for the first time. You laugh nervously, but when you lean over the railing that night and see bubbles foaming mysteriously in the dark, you suddenly wonder, what if the ocean really could just let go? The methane gas idea remains one of the triangle's most enduring scientific explanations. Not definitive, not perfect, but unsettling enough to keep even skeptics awake at night. While methane bubbles sparked imaginations, another explanation kept tugging at the mystery magnetism. For centuries, sailors whispered that compasses spun strangely in the Bermuda Triangle, pointing in directions that made no sense. Early navigators feared invisible forces pulling their ships astray, as if the ocean itself had a mischievous will. The science Earth's magnetic field isn't uniform. Most places on the planet have a difference between true north, the geographic pole, and magnetic north, where compasses point. Sailors account for this with adjustments called declination. But in a few rare places, the two norths line up almost perfectly. Legend claims one of those zones passes straight through the Bermuda Triangle. For inexperienced navigators, forgetting to correct their course could send them miles off track. That's the practical version. The more dramatic version, well, you can guess. Fringe thinkers suggested the triangle sits on some kind of magnetic vortex, a place where Earth's field fluctuates wildly, disorienting pilots and frying electronics. A pilot in the 1960s even reported his instrument spinning wildly before he narrowly escaped a storm near Puerto Rico. Whether mechanical fault or magnetic mayhem, The story fueled belief in an invisible hand twisting compasses. Scientists are still debating how much magnetism really plays a role. Modern studies suggest that while the triangle does contain minor anomalies, they aren't unique. Similar quirks exist worldwide from Siberia to the Pacific, and yet accidents elsewhere rarely get the same mythical weight. Why? Because magnetic Siberia just doesn't sound as catchy. A quirky tidbit. In 1970, pilot Bruce Jernin claimed he experienced a time slip over the triangle. He described flying into a strange cloud tunnel, watching his instruments fail, and then emerging to find he had traveled far faster than possible. He insisted magnetism, or something like it, had warped time itself. Skeptics roll their eyes, but the story remains a triangle classic. Imagine yourself in a cockpit at night, clouds closing in, lightning flashing on the horizon. Your compass needle jitters, then spins. The altimeter drops to 0. The radio hisses static. Every logical part of your brain says it's a malfunction, but the whisper of legend insists you've crossed into a place where physics bends. That tension between reasonable explanation and impossible experience is why magnetism remains one of the triangle's favorite suspects. Rational or not, it makes the ocean feel alive, as if it has moods and secrets all its own. By the time the 1970s rolled around, scientific theories about methane and magnetism were fascinating. But let's be honest, they weren't nearly as fun at a campfire as tales of aliens and Atlantis. These fringe explanations gave the Bermuda Triangle the irresistible sparkle that science couldn't quite match. The Atlantis idea dates back to psychic Edgar Cayce, who claimed that the lost city lay somewhere beneath the waves near the Bahamas. He suggested its powerful crystal technology might still be active, zapping ships and planes unlucky enough to drift overhead. Decades later, divers near Bimini discovered long flat stones arranged like a road. Dubbed the Bimini Road, it quickly became Exhibit A for Atlantis believers, even though geologists insisted the stones were naturally fractured limestone. To mystery fans, it was proof that an ancient super-civilization was still meddling in modern times. Aliens, of course, were the triangle's other favorite suspects. UFO enthusiasts argued that extraterrestrials might be using the area as a cosmic bus stop, abducting humans, testing technology, or slipping through hidden portals in the sea. A few even suggested that bright lights Columbus saw in 1492 weren't lanterns or meteors, but UFOs keeping an eye on history's most famous voyage. It sounds wild, but remember, when you're alone on the open ocean at night, even a distant glow can feel like a message from the stars. Scientists are still debating why such fringe theories take hold so easily. Part of it is human nature. The unknown begs for an extraordinary explanation. And part of it is fun. Let's face it, a hurricane sank. That ship doesn't thrill like aliens snatched it midair. A quirky tidbit. In the 1990s, a Florida man tried to sell triangle alien insurance. For a small fee, you'd be reimbursed if abducted while traveling through the region. He claimed to have sold dozens of policies. No word on whether any payouts were made. Picture a family on a cruise ship in the 1980s, leaning over the railing as night falls. One child whispers, "What if we see aliens tonight?" The parents chuckle, but a moment later, a shooting star streaks across the sky, and suddenly everyone falls silent. For just a second, it doesn't matter that the rational explanation is a meteor. The magic is in believing it could be something more. That's the power of the triangle's fringe, lore. It keeps the imagination wide awake even when the ocean itself is still. Beyond storms, methane bubbles, and alien motherships, the Bermuda Triangle has always had a simpler, almost embarrassing explanation. Humans make mistakes. Ships and planes don't always vanish because the ocean is cursed. Sometimes it's because crews are tired. Instruments are misread or captains take risks they shouldn't. The Triangle sits in a region notorious for rapid weather changes. A pilot can take off in sunny skies and within an hour be flying into thick clouds, lightning and pounding rain. Early aircraft had limited range crude navigation systems and no GPS. Even small miscalculations could leave pilots running out of fuel over open ocean. For sailors, sudden storms combined with heavy seas meant one wrong decision could capsize a vessel in minutes. Take Flight 19 again. While it's tempting to imagine a magnetic vortex or alien tractor beam, many aviation historians argue that the squadron's commander simply misjudged his position, believing he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually east of the Bahamas. He led his men further out to sea. By the time they realized the mistake, they were too far gone to recover. A tragic error, not a supernatural act. Another overlooked factor: fatigue. Many Triangle accidents involved long-haul crews who had been awake for hours, even days. Fatigue dulls judgment, slows reaction times, and increases the likelihood of small mistakes snowballing into catastrophe. Add the stress of pounding seas or instrument failure, and accidents become almost inevitable. A quirky tidbit: during World War II, the US Navy actually trained its navigators in a phrase that now sounds eerily like a joke: dead reckoning is better than dead. The idea was to constantly check bearings because a few degrees off could mean hundreds of miles lost. In the Bermuda Triangle, that advice wasn't just catchy, it was survival. Scientists are still debating whether the Triangle has higher accident rates than other busy regions. Some studies show it's statistically average. Others hint at a slightly elevated risk, likely due to the tricky combination of geography and weather. Either way, the human element cannot be ignored. Picture a sailor in the 1930s clutching the wheel of a freighter in a storm. The compass swings the wave's tower, and his crew shouts conflicting orders. It's not a ghost pulling the ship down, it's exhaustion, fear, and a few poor decisions colliding in the wrong moment. And yet, to the families waiting on shore, those explanations rarely soothe. A vanished loved one leaves a hole too deep for statistics. Human error may explain the loss, but mystery explains the silence. The Bermuda Triangle's allure is not just about what has vanished, but how stories grow after the vanishings. In truth, many so-called mysteries have been embellished, exaggerated, or even invented. The line between fact and folklore has blurred, and sometimes the legend is far larger than the reality. One example is the case of the Ellen Austin in 1881. The story goes that the ship encountered a drifting crewless schooner in the Triangle. When the Ellen Austin's sailors boarded it empty and tried to sail it back, the schooner mysteriously disappeared twice. To this day, the tale is told as an eerie ghost ship encounter, but historians digging into records have found no solid evidence of such a disappearance. It may have been nothing more than a sailor's barroom yarn that took on a life of its own. The same pattern repeats with other cases. Newspapers of the early 1900s often sensationalized missing ships to sell papers. Terms like swallowed without a trace were used even when wreckage was later found. Flight 19 itself wasn't called vanished without explanation until decades later, when writers like Vincent Gaddis and Charles Berlitz turned the incident into part of the Triangle myth. Charles Berlitz's 1974 book, The Bermuda Triangle, is perhaps the single greatest force behind the legend. It became a bestseller, claiming that paranormal forces, ancient Atlantis technology, or extraterrestrials were at work. Yet critics pointed out that Berlitz often left out key details like storms in progress, distress calls, mentioning fuel shortages, or errors in navigation logs. By trimming reality, he sharpened mystery. and the public loved it. The 1970s and 1980s saw documentaries, films, and novels feeding the idea of a cursed stretch of sea, a place where normal rules no longer applied. Even the US Coast Guard was forced to release official statements clarifying that no greater danger existed in the Triangle than anywhere else. Their dry, bureaucratic words, however, couldn't compete with the thrill of the unknown. Pop culture made the Triangle bigger than science ever could. Episodes of In Search of, Unsolved Mysteries, and countless late-night radio shows turned it into a symbol of danger lurking in plain sight. Tour companies in Florida even began marketing Bermuda Triangle boat rides, where tourists could brave the cursed waters while sipping cocktails. Here lies the paradox. The Triangle may not be more dangerous than other oceans, but belief itself has made it one of the most famous locations on Earth. People vanish every year in the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, or near the Cape of Good Hope, but it's the Bermuda Triangle that captures imaginations. Why? Perhaps because we want the world to be stranger than it seems. The ocean is vast, unpredictable, and frightening. By shaping accidents into legend, we give chaos a face, a name, a story. So while science strips away mystery, folklore restores it. The Bermuda Triangle is no longer just coordinates on a map. It's a cultural mythos, a modern sea monster made not of scales and teeth, but of vanishing ships, silent radios, and unanswered questions. And like all myths, it grows every time it's told. Despite the decades of study, the Bermuda Triangle has never fully yielded its secrets. Official investigations insist that the region is statistically no more dangerous than any other stretch of ocean. Records from the US Navy Coast Guard and aviation authorities reveal that many disappearances can be explained by storms, navigational mistakes, or equipment failure. Yet even as explanations pile up, a strange truth remains: the mystery never disappears. Part of this comes from the sheer scale of the Atlantic. When a ship or plane goes missing in such a vast expanse, recovery is difficult. Wreckage sinks, scatters, or is carried by currents far from the last known position. To families and the public, this absence of physical proof feels unsettling, leaving room for whispers of the unknown. Modern technology has helped reduce some of the uncertainty. With satellite tracking, GPS navigation, and advanced communication, today's ships and aircraft rarely vanish without a trace. Still, even in recent decades, a handful of cases stir unease. Small planes flying between the islands sometimes vanish suddenly from radar, leaving no signal of distress. Search parties find nothing but open sea. For believers, these events prove the Triangle's curse endures. For skeptics, they are tragic reminders of the ocean's indifference. Either way, they feed the enduring legend. Interestingly, the Bermuda Triangle has also become a scientific curiosity. Some oceanographers study its currents, while geologists monitor the seafloor for methane hydrate eruptions. Meteorologists examine the region's tendency to spawn sudden storms, waterspouts, and rogue waves. The Triangle is now less of a haunted zone and more of a natural laboratory, offering insights into how unpredictable the sea can be. And yet science alone cannot erase the haunting aura. Stories from sailors still trickle in compasses that spin oddly for no reason. Radios filled with static, the eerie silence of vast waters that feel somehow unnatural. The legend persists not just because of what has been lost, but because it touches something deep in the human spirit, the need to confront the unknown. It is the same reason we tell ghost stories around campfires or gaze at the stars wondering about life beyond Earth. The Bermuda Triangle is an ocean mirror reflecting our own fears and hopes. At night, as waves lap against the sides of passing vessels, many sailors admit to feeling the weight of that legend. They look out over the dark sea and wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, some mysteries remain beyond human grasp. And so the Bermuda Triangle continues half ocean, half myth, and fully alive in the imagination of the world. The Bermuda Triangle may have begun as a geographic quirk, but over time it has become a storytelling engine, a place where imagination and reality meet. Writers, filmmakers, and conspiracy theorists keep returning to its waters, weaving tales that blur fact and fiction. In doing so, they ensure the triangle will never fade from memory, even if science dismisses its mysteries. Think of the countless works of fiction inspired by it. Novels where submarines vanish into underwater cities, television shows where time itself bends over the triangle, movies where lost planes reappear decades later, untouched by time. These tales don't claim to be factual, but they shape how the public sees the region. Every dramatization, every eerie special effect reinforces the sense that this part of the ocean is different, special, and untamable. Beyond entertainment, the triangle has influenced how we talk about uncertainty. Journalists invoke it when describing vanished fortunes, broken careers, or even failing technology. Lost in the Bermuda Triangle has become shorthand for anything that disappears without explanation. The legend has leapt from the sea into language itself. At the same time, scholars point out that the triangle reflects a deeper human pattern. When we lack answers, we create stories. It's easier, sometimes even comforting, to imagine alien abductions, ancient curses, or portals to other dimensions than to accept the cruel randomness of storms and seas. By giving misfortune a supernatural face, people can wrestle with chaos through myth. The myth also offers a rare reminder of humility. In an age of satellites, digital maps, and near-instant communication, we like to believe the Earth is fully known, fully charted. The Bermuda Triangle whispers otherwise. It says here is a place where not everything bends to human control, where nature and mystery still rule. That whisper keeps our imaginations alive, reminding us that discovery is never finished. Even skeptics armed with rational explanations often confess to a lingering unease. When passing through the triangle, pilots still check their instruments twice. Sailors still glance at the horizon with wary eyes. Rational or not, the legend changes behavior. It seeps into decision-making, shaping how humans face the sea. And perhaps that is the triangle's greatest power, not the disappearances themselves, but the way it makes us look at the world. It transforms the familiar Atlantic into a stage for wonder and dread, a reminder that mystery is never far away. As long as humans love stories, the Bermuda Triangle will endure, not just as a patch of ocean, but as a living myth eternally renewed by each generation that dares to cross it. Night settles over the Atlantic, and the waters of the Bermuda Triangle stretch into darkness, endless and silent. For all the storms, vanishings, and whispered legends, the sea also carries a calm so deep it seems to belong to another world. Waves roll in gentle rhythms, the moon paints silver paths across the surface, and beneath it all, life continues, schools of fish drifting, plankton, slow, ancient whales passing unseen. Here fear softens. The triangle, for all its reputation, is mostly just ocean, vast, beautiful, indifferent. Sailors describe nights when the water is glassy smooth, so still it reflects stars as clearly as a mirror. In those moments, the legends feel far away. The triangle becomes less a trap and more a reminder of how small humanity is compared to the great rhythms of Earth. And still, people come. Ships trace their routes across these waters. Airplanes arc overhead. Technology grows sharper, radar, more precise, communication nearly flawless. Disappearances are fewer now, though the mystery remains unsolved. Scientists are still debating whether methane eruptions, magnetic quirks, or simple storms explain the old vanishings. Yet even if every case were explained tomorrow, the myth would linger. Stories are harder to sink than ships. Maybe that's why travelers speak of an odd comfort here. The unknown reminds them that the world is never fully mapped, that there are always questions left unanswered. Just as the ocean hides its depths, so too does life hide its meaning, its surprises, its quiet wonders. The Bermuda Triangle reflects that truth, part menace, part beauty, part enigma. And now, with the mystery explored, the narration slows, the waters calm, the last ripples fade into the stillness of night, leaving only a hush, like the world exhaling. You can rest now. You don't need to solve the puzzle. You only need to let it carry you soft and weightless into quiet dreams. Now, as everything drifts towards silence, imagine yourself lying safely on the deck of a quiet ship. The ocean stretches endlessly in every direction, but instead of fear, there's peace. The stars are brighter than city lights, brighter than you remembered, scattered across the sky like diamonds. A soft wind brushes your face steady and cool, rocking you gently like a cradle. The Bermuda Triangle, for all its mystery, is no longer a place of danger here. It is simply vast water under an endless sky. The ships, the planes, the unanswered questions, they fade into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of the sea. You don't need to chase answers tonight. You don't need to worry about what's hidden in the depths. Instead, let yourself feel the quiet comfort of not knowing, of letting go. The mysteries of the world can wait until tomorrow. Tonight they serve a different purpose. They carry your mind further and further away from the noise of the day, towards stillness, towards sleep. Picture the waves slowing, each one smaller, softer, until they are barely ripples. Picture the stars above beginning to blur as your eyes grow heavy. The sea and the sky become one continuous blanket, wrapping around you in calm. Your breath deepens. Your body grows warm and weightless. The sound of my voice becomes softer, like a tide pulling gently back. And with every passing moment, you slip further into that calm space where thought turns to dream. So rest. Rest knowing the ocean will hold its secrets, and you can let yours go for now. Rest knowing you are safe here in this story, here in this moment. Rest knowing that tomorrow will come, and with it light. But for now, the triangle grows quiet, the night grows deep, and sleep waits for you tender and patient. Drift into it. Drift and let go. Drift into dreams.